Tavani was born under a red sky. The world of her people, the Veyari, was harsh and beautiful. Wide deserts, glowing rivers, and endless cliffs that caught the light like fire. Their cities rose from black stone, carved by hands and claws across generations. It was a place where survival demanded strength and strength defined worth. From the moment she could remember, Tavani understood that she was different. Where the other young grew quickly into tall and proud forms, their shoulders wide and their crests shining like polished blades, she remained small. Her body was slender, her crest dull, her claws too short to impress anyone. Even her voice, softer than the deep growls of her kin, was often ignored. She had parents once. She remembered their warmth, though the memory was fading like a fire going cold. Her father's strong arms, her mother's gentle hums before sleep. But all of that ended the day the mines collapsed. The earth devoured them in an instant, leaving only silence, dust, and an orphaned child. The colony took her in, yes, but not into their hearts. Among the Veyari, pity was not the same as love. They gave her food. They gave her shelter. But no one gave her affection. No one called her family. And as the years passed, she became something worse than invisible. She became a reminder of weakness, a reminder of failure. When the young ones gathered to train, Tavani stood at the edge. They wrestled and fought, their crests flashing with pride, their voices loud with confidence. She tried once, only once, to join them. The fight lasted 3 breaths before she was thrown into the dust, coughing, humiliated. The laughter that followed still rang in her ears years later. After that, she stopped trying. She told herself she was not meant for those things, that perhaps her path was different. But in truth, she only stopped hoping. Time passed and the season of bonding drew near. Among the Veyari, it was the most important time in a young one's life. Songs were sung, feasts were held, and matches were made. Partnerships were not only about affection, they were survival. A mate meant a future. A mate meant a family. Tavani felt the weight of it heavier than anyone else. She had dreamed in secret of being chosen, of hearing someone's voice declare, "She is mine and I am hers." But when the time came, no one even glanced her way. The strong males looked for shining crests, wide hips, powerful claws. The strong females chose partners with heavy voices and sharp fangs. Tavani was neither. She was not strong enough to be admired, not beautiful enough to be noticed. She sat at the edge of the gathering, hands folded in her lap, watching others dance and laugh while her heart cracked slowly, quietly, like thin glass. At first, she told herself that maybe it was not her turn yet, that perhaps someone shy, someone gentle might see her as she was. But as days stretched into weeks and weeks into months, the truth pressed down on her chest like a stone. No one wanted her. The whispers grew sharper with time. She is not even female, not truly. She is too small, too quiet, too weak. Her line ended with her parents. She carries nothing worth keeping. Tavani pretended not to hear, but every word carved itself into her soul. She avoided mirrors, unable to look at the creature staring back. She hated the thinness of her body, the dullness of her crest, the softness of her voice. She hated herself. And yet, some part of her still longed for someone to notice her, someone to say she was enough. She never spoke this aloud. The Veyari did not believe in weakness of the heart, but at night, lying alone on her small sleeping mat, she would curl into herself and whisper the words no one else ever gave her. "You are worthy. You are female. You are enough." The words did not heal her, but they kept her from breaking completely. Her life became routine. Days of work, silent meals, empty nights. The others forgot she was young, forgot she was waiting, forgot she was even there. She was a shadow in her own home, moving quietly so as not to disturb the world that had no place for her. Still, deep inside, a stubborn spark refused to die. It was the memory of warmth, her parents' voices, their love. She clung to it, fragile though it was. Sometimes when she walked through the colony's stone streets, she would lift her eyes to the red sky and wonder, is there truly no one? Not one soul who could see me? And always the silence answered back. That silence became her companion until the day the humans arrived. They came with their ships, silver wings cutting across the red horizon, strange beings, soft-skinned and small compared to the Veyari, yet moving with a boldness that startled everyone. Their laughter filled the markets. Their hands touched everything, curious and unafraid. They were not strong, not by Veyari standards, but they carried themselves as if strength was something else entirely. Tavani watched them from a distance at first. She told herself she did not care, but secretly she was fascinated. The humans smiled often. They spoke to one another with warmth, with ease, with affection that seemed to flow as freely as air. They hugged. They held hands. They laughed loudly without shame. It was everything her world lacked. Everything she had been starving for, and then one of them looked at her. The Vayari colony had seen traders before, beings from different worlds who came and went with little care. But the day the humans arrived, everything felt different. Their ships broke through the red sky like falling stars. They were not graceful like the sleek vessels of the Keth or the glittering spires of the Orun. Human ships were practical, boxy, and scarred with use. Yet they landed with confidence, engines roaring like beasts announcing their arrival. The Vayari gathered at the edge of the landing zone, cautious and proud. They were a species of strength, and to them, every outsider was a potential threat. Their crests glowed faintly in warning as the airlock hissed open. Then the humans stepped out. They were strange, too soft. Their skin lacked scales, only covered with thin hair. Their bodies seemed fragile, their shoulders narrow, their voices light compared to the deep growls of the Vayari. Many in the colony whispered that they would never survive long in a world like this, and yet the humans did not seem afraid. They walked forward smiling, laughing, as if the harsh desert sun and sharp stares of the Vayari meant nothing. They extended hands in greeting. They bowed awkwardly. They carried small devices that translated words clumsily but with effort. To the Vayari it was confusing. To Tavani it was fascinating. She watched them from a distance. She told herself it was only curiosity, but her heart beat faster each time she caught the sound of their voices. So warm, so alive. They touched one another so easily. A hand on a shoulder, a laugh shared with arms brushing. Simple, casual signs of connection. The Vayari did not do this. Touch was rare, reserved only for bonds or battles. But the humans seemed to treat touch as natural as breathing. It made Tavani ache in a place she didn't have words for. And then there was him, Elias. He was not a leader. Not a captain. Not even one of the loud traders who spoke for the human ship. He was an engineer, a worker. His uniform marked with stains from grease and dust. His hair was always messy, his sleeves rolled, his hands rough from fixing machines. He did not stand out to others. But to Tavani he was impossible to ignore, because he noticed her. The first time was in the market. Tavani was moving quietly along the stalls, collecting small fruits and herbs. As usual, no one paid her much attention. Even the vendor placed the items in her hands without meeting her eyes, eager to serve the brighter, stronger females nearby. But Elias was there, kneeling beside a broken power unit, muttering to himself as he tinkered with its wires. When Tavani passed, he looked up. Their eyes met, and he smiled. It was not a polite smile, not the kind one gives to strangers out of duty. It was real. His eyes softened. The corners of his mouth lifted as though seeing her brought him a small moment of joy. Tavani froze. She did not know how to react. No one ever looked at her like that. She turned quickly away, her claws tight around the basket in her hands. But her chest burned with something she had never felt before. The second time was no accident. She was sitting by the water's edge, dipping her hands into the glowing river that cut through the colony. The sun was low, painting the cliffs in red and gold. She liked coming here. It was quiet. No stares, no whispers, only the sound of water and her own thoughts. But that day, footsteps approached. She stiffened, ready to move away before someone could chase her off. Instead, a human voice spoke gently. "Beautiful, isn't it?" She turned, startled. It was him again, Elias. He sat down near her, not too close, but close enough that she could feel his presence. His gaze was on the river, not on her, as though he knew she might run if he stared too directly. For a long moment, neither spoke. The silence was heavy for her, but comfortable for him. Finally, Elias broke it with a small laugh. "Sorry, I didn't mean to intrude. This place is nicer than the noise back there." Tavani opened her mouth, then closed it. She was not used to talking. Not used to being asked anything at all. Still, the words slipped out, quiet and halting. "It is peaceful." His head turned, eyes bright with surprise and warmth. "You speak my language?" She hesitated. Her people's tongues were sharp and heavy. But she had listened carefully to the humans, picking up bits from their trade talk. A little. Sometimes she wanted to scream at him, "Why do you care? Why can't you leave me in the shadows where I belong?" But another part of her whispered, "Because you don't want him to leave. Because his light is the only thing keeping you alive." One night she dreamt of her parents. In the dream, her father's arms were strong. Her mother's hum was gentle. They looked at her with pride the way no one else ever had. But when she reached for them, they faded into smoke, leaving only silence. When she woke, her chest ached with loneliness so deep it felt endless. She went to the river again, desperate for air, for space, for something more. And there he was, Elias, waiting. He didn't speak at first. He only sat beside her the way he always did, quiet and steady. After a long while, he said, "I know they don't approve. I know it hurts, but, Tavani, I don't care what they think. I see you. I choose to." Tears stung her eyes. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to hold those words close and never let go. But she feared the world was too cruel to let them be true. Still, when she whispered back, her voice trembling, it was the most honest thing she had ever said. "That's more than I expected," Elias said, grinning. "I'm still struggling with yours. Every word I say sounds like I'm choking on rocks." Against her will, a soft sound escaped her. Not quite a laugh, but close. She quickly looked away, embarrassed. But Elias only leaned back, satisfied, as though earning that sound was a victory. After that, he kept noticing her. In the market. By the river. Even in the crowded festival grounds where everyone else ignored her. Elias would catch her eye and wave like an old friend. Tavani didn't understand it. She told herself it was nothing. Humans were strange, too friendly with everyone. Maybe this was just how they acted. But when his smile found her, she felt something she couldn't deny. Seen. Wanted. Alive. The others noticed too. "Why does the human look at her?" they whispered. "Does he not see? She is nothing. She is not even worth pity." The words stung as always. But this time a small seed of defiance grew inside her. Because someone, even if he was strange, soft, alien, had chosen to see her, and that was more than her own people had ever given her. She tried once to push him away. When Elias sat beside her at the river again, she said in a broken voice, "You should not sit with me. Others are stronger, brighter, better. I am nothing." He looked at her for a long time, then shook his head. "You're not nothing," he said simply. "You're you." The words were so small, so plain, yet they struck her harder than any insult. Her throat tightened, her eyes burned. She turned away quickly so he would not see the tears threatening to fall. No one had ever spoken to her like that before, and for the first time, she wondered if maybe, just maybe, she was more than what her people told her she was. The bond between Tavani and Elias began quietly. They did not speak every day, but whenever their paths crossed, something gentle passed between them. A smile, a short word, a moment of warmth. To Tavani, even those fragments felt like treasures, but nothing in the colony stayed hidden for long. Soon others noticed, and when they noticed, they judged. At first it was only whispers. Two females speaking while grinding roots, a group of young males pretending to train but sneaking glances toward her. Why does the human waste time with her? Does he not see she is small, weak, unworthy? Perhaps humans are blind. That would explain it. Tavani pretended not to hear, but her chest tightened each time. She kept her head down, shoulders hunched as though shrinking might make the words miss her. But words always found her. They clung to her like dust, and the cruelest of all was one she heard again and again. She is not even female. Not properly. Among the Veyari, being female was not only about body. It was about pride, strength, the ability to bear strong children and lead in battle. A female who lacked those things was considered incomplete. A mistake. Tavani knew they looked at her and saw failure. Thin arms, dull crest, soft voice. She could not fight. She could not lead. She could barely keep her place in the work groups. To them, she was nothing more than a shadow wearing a female shape. The pain of those words cut deeper than claws. She wanted to scream at them, to tell them that she was still Veyari, still female, still alive. But the words died in her throat every time. She had no proof to fight back, and so she let silence answer for her. Elias noticed her silence. One evening they sat by the glowing river. The sun had set, and the stars scattered above like silver dust. He had been talking about something simple, a machine he fixed. A story about another engineer tripping into a vat of paint. His laugh was warm, full of life, but Tavani did not laugh with him. Her eyes stayed low, her shoulders tight. Finally, he leaned closer, his voice quiet. "You've been different." "What's wrong?" Her claws dug into the earth. She shook her head. "Nothing." Elias studied her for a long moment. "It doesn't look like nothing." Tavani's throat burned. She wanted to stay silent, to hide, but the weight inside her was too heavy, and for the first time she let the words slip out. "They say, I am not female." "Not truly." Elias blinked, surprised. "Not female?" She nodded, shame making her voice crack. "I am too small, too weak. No mate will ever choose me. No family will ever accept me. They laugh when you sit with me. They think you are blind. They think I trick you." Her chest heaved. She had never spoken so much at once, never opened the wound so fully. She waited for Elias to laugh, to leave, to confirm every cruel word. But he didn't. He reached out, slow and gentle, as if afraid she might pull away. His hand stopped just short of hers, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from his skin. "Do you believe them?" he asked softly. Tavani hesitated. Her claws trembled. "Sometimes," Elias's voice grew firm. "Then they're wrong." Her eyes lifted wide, uncertain. "Why?" "You do not know what it means to be Veyari." "No," Elias admitted. "I don't, but I know what it means to be someone, to be alive, to be seen, and I see you, Tavani. Not their words, not their judgment, you." The warmth of his words sank into her like light into cold stone. For a moment she could not breathe. No one had ever spoken to her like that, not even her parents before they were gone. Her heart whispered, "Could it be true? Could I really be more than what they say?" But fear was stronger. She pulled her claws away, curling them tight against her chest. "You should not be with me. It will only bring you shame. Talk to the others. They are strong, bright, worthy. I am nothing." Elias's brow furrowed, his voice steady, unshaken. "You're not nothing. You're you. That's enough for me." The next day, the whispers turned into stares. When Tavani walked through the market, she felt eyes follow her. Noticed how conversations hushed when Elias waved at her from across the stalls. Heard the laughter hidden behind claws. Even the elders began to notice. Their gazes were sharp, filled with disapproval. To them, a bond between human and Veyari meant nothing, but a bond between a human and her was worse than nothing. It was humiliation. Tavani's steps grew heavier each day. She avoided the river, avoided the market, avoided him. But Elias did not stop. He always found her, always smiled, always asked if she was all right. Then, "Please do not stop seeing me." Elias's smile in that moment was softer than starlight, and though the colony still stared, still whispered, Tavani felt something stir inside her, a fragile hope, daring to grow. Every year, the Veyari celebrated the Festival of Flames. It was the most important tradition of their people, marking the turning of the season and the renewal of life. Fires were lit along the cliffs, songs rose into the night, and the young gathered to show their worth. For the strong, it was a time of pride. For the weak, it was a reminder of shame. Tavani dreaded it. She had lived through many festivals, always at the edges, always unnoticed. She knew what awaited, the dancing, the boasting, the choosing of mates. She knew she would stand alone while others laughed and shone, and yet she had no choice. The festival was for everyone, even those who wished to disappear. That year the humans were invited. Out of politeness, the elders allowed them to watch, though in truth the humans were considered little more than guests of amusement. The Veyari thought humans too fragile, too clumsy, too soft to understand their sacred traditions. But Elias came anyway. The fires burned bright when Tavani arrived. The air smelled of spice and smoke. Music pounded like drums of war, heavy and wild. Young males and females painted their scales with bright dusts, their crests glowing like flames as they moved with power and grace. Tavani stood far back, in the shadows, as always. She wrapped her arms around herself, trying to look small, trying to vanish. Her heart sank with each laugh that wasn't meant for her, each glance that passed over her as though she were air, and then she saw him. Elias was among the crowd, his simple clothes dusty, his hair untidy, but his eyes alive with wonder. He was fascinated by the dances, clapping offbeat to the rhythm, smiling at everything. When his gaze swept across the gathering, it landed on her, and he didn't look away. He walked toward her, weaving through the crowd with that same easy confidence that always startled her. The others stared. Some sneered. A few whispered loudly enough for her to hear. But Elias did not care. He stopped in front of her, holding something in his hand and a small fruit, its skin glowing faintly under the firelight. He offered it to her with a grin. "You look hungry," he said lightly. Tavani blinked, frozen. No one had ever offered her food at the festival. Food was given as a sign of interest, of recognition. To take it was to accept attention. Her claws trembled as she stared at the fruit. The whispers grew louder. Is he serious? With her? This is a joke. Tavani's chest burned. She wanted to run, to hide, to push him away so he wouldn't share her shame. But Elias only stood there, hand steady, eyes kind. "Dance with me," he said. The words struck her like a storm. Dance with him? In front of everyone? The idea was unthinkable. Her people would laugh. The elders would scowl. She herself would stumble and fall, making a fool of them both. She shook her head quickly, panic rising. No, I cannot." "Why not?" Elias asked gently. Her voice cracked. "They will mock us. They will mock you." Elias shrugged as if it meant nothing. "Let them. I didn't come here for them." "I came here for you," her heart thundered. She could not breathe. The world around her blurred with fire and music, but his words burned brighter than all of it. Still, fear chained her. "I do not know the steps." "Then we'll make our own," he said simply. And he held out his hand. For a long moment, Tavani stared at that hand. Rough, human, warm. The firelight glinted against his skin, making it glow like an ember. Her people's eyes pierced her from all sides. She could feel their contempt, their disbelief. But in that moment, another feeling rose stronger than fear. Longing. The longing to be seen, to be chosen, to step out of the shadows just once. Her claws shook. Her breath trembled, and then slowly she placed her hand in his. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Voices hissed. The music did not stop, but the rhythm seemed to fade beneath the sound of judgment. Elias squeezed her hand gently, reassuring. "Just follow me," he whispered, and so she did. They moved clumsily at first. Elias was not skilled in Veyari dances, and Tavani's legs were stiff with nerves. She stumbled, nearly falling, but Elias steadied her with ease, his laugh light, unbothered. "See? Not so bad," he teased. Tavani's lips trembled. For a moment she almost smiled. As they moved slowly, awkwardly, something strange happened. The music wrapped around them. The fire painted their faces. Elias guided her, not with force but with patience. And Tavani began to feel it, not the shame, not the stares, but the rhythm. The joy her feet found the beat. Her body loosened. Her crest, usually dull, caught the firelight and shimmered faintly. She had never shone before, not even a little, but now the glow reached her. The whispers around them turned sharper, but Tavani barely heard them. For the first time, she was not standing alone at the edges. She was in the center, and someone wanted her there. When the dance ended, silence hung heavy. The crowd stared. Some mocked with smirks, others glared with outrage. The elders' eyes burned with fury. This was not tradition. This was shame. Tavani's chest tightened again. The weight of their scorn crashed down. She pulled her hand back quickly, trembling. But Elias stepped forward, unafraid. He bowed slightly to her in front of everyone, then smiled. "Thank you," he said softly, as if she had given him the greatest gift. Her throat closed. Tears stung her eyes. She turned away before anyone could see them, fleeing into the shadows once more. That night she sat alone by the river, her claws pressed against her chest. She could still feel the warmth of his hand, the sound of his laugh, the rhythm of their steps. For one brief moment she had been more than nothing, and though the colony scorned her, though the elders' anger would surely come, her heart whispered a truth she could not ignore. She wanted that moment again. The morning after the festival, the colony was heavy with silence. Fires had burned low, songs had faded, but the memory of what happened still lingered like smoke in the air. Everyone had seen it, the human dancing with the orphan. The weak one. The unwanted one. Tavani, by tradition, the festival was meant to display strength, beauty, and pride. It was where bonds began, where families chose their future. But instead of pride, the people remembered shame. Shame that a human, a fragile outsider, had chosen to step into the circle with the one they had long rejected. The whispers that had followed Tavani, All her life became open scorn. She has humiliated us. She brings only disgrace. Even the human must be blind to touch her. The words were cruel, sharp as blades, but they no longer hid behind closed doors. They were spoken loudly so she could hear. So Elias could hear. The elders called for a gathering. Tavani stood in the great hall, her body trembling as she faced the sharp eyes of the leaders. Their crests glowed with disapproval, their voices deep with anger. "You have shamed your people," one said. "You use the festival to mock tradition," another growled. "You let a human make a fool of you." Her throat tightened, but she could not answer. She wanted to defend herself, to say she hadn't asked for any of it, that she hadn't dared hope Elias would stand by her in front of everyone, but her voice betrayed her, trembling too much to be heard. Then the elders turned their attention to Elias. "You are a guest here," one said coldly. "We gave you shelter, we allowed you to trade, and this is how you repay us? By dragging our weakest into shame?" Elias stood straight, unflinching. His voice was calm but firm. "I didn't drag her anywhere, I asked. She chose to dance." A hiss of outrage spread through the hall. "She does not understand what you asked. She is desperate, unworthy, a mistake. Better no mate at all than this insult." Tavani flinched at the words. They had said many things about her over the years, but this was the cruelest. That she would be better off alone forever than chosen, even by a human. She lowered her head, claws clenched tight against her chest. Shame washed over her like fire. When the gathering ended, she fled. Out of the hall, through the stone streets to the edge of the cliffs where the desert stretched endlessly. She fell to her knees, chest heaving, tears burning her eyes. She had thought the whispers were bad, but this was worse. Now the whole colony hated her. Now even the elders had spoken their rejection. She pressed her claws against her face and whispered broken words to the empty sky. "They are right. I am nothing. I am not female. I should not have let him choose me. I should not have stepped forward." A shadow fell over her, Elias. He had followed her, though she hadn't heard his steps. Now he stood behind her, silent for a long moment before lowering himself to sit at her side. She didn't look at him. She couldn't. She was afraid of what she might see in his face, and regret, pity, disgust. Finally, she whispered, her voice raw. "You see now, they are right. I am not wanted. You will regret this." For a moment there was only silence. Then Elias spoke, steady and certain. "I don't regret it." Her head jerked up, eyes wide with disbelief. "How? They hate me. They hate you for standing with me." Elias's gaze held hers without wavering. "I don't care what they think. I didn't choose them. I chose you." Her claws trembled. Her chest ached. "Why?" "Because when I look at you," he said softly, "I see someone who has survived everything. Someone who still stands even when the whole world pushes her down. They say you're weak, but I've never seen anyone stronger. They say you're nothing, but to me you're everything." Her breath caught. Tears spilled freely now, sliding down her scaled cheeks. She had dreamed of hearing words like these, but never believed they would come. Not from her people, not from anyone. And yet here he was, a human, an outsider, speaking them as though they were the simplest truth in the universe. Still, fear lingered. She shook her head, choking on her words. "They will never accept us, never. If you stay near me, you will only suffer." Elias gave a small, stubborn smile. "Then let them hate me too. I've survived worse. What matters is that I don't hate you." His words struck deep, breaking the chains of silence that had bound her for so long. For the first time, she felt a spark of defiance, a spark of something dangerous, something beautiful. Hope. The colony did not soften. In the days that followed, the stares grew sharper, the whispers louder. Some laughed openly when Tavani passed. Some muttered insults at Elias, calling him a fool, a blind wanderer wasting his time on a mistake. But Elias never wavered. He walked beside her in the market, unashamed. He shared food with her by the river, smiling as though the whole world were theirs. He asked her questions, listened to her halting answers, laughed at her shy jokes. Each moment was a small rebellion, each smile a blade cutting through the weight of scorn. And slowly, painfully, Tavani began to believe his words. That maybe she was not nothing. That maybe she was enough. One evening, she stood before a mirror of polished stone. She stared at her reflection, The narrow shoulders, the dull crest, the soft eyes. She had always hated what she saw, always turned away before the shame grew too sharp, but this time she lingered. She remembered Elias's voice. I chose you. She touched the stone with trembling claws and whispered to her reflection, I am female. I am enough. The words were fragile, but for the first time they did not feel like lies. The colony had rejected her. The elders had scorned her, but Elias had not turned away, and in the warmth of that choice, Tavani felt something she had never felt before. A future. The sky was red that evening, not with the gentle glow of sunset, but with fire. The first warning came as a deep rumble in the distance, followed by the shriek of alarms. Raiders. For years, whispers of their attacks had haunted the colony, but no one truly believed they would come here. Yet now the ground shook beneath heavy engines and dark ships split the sky like knives. Panic spread through the streets. Families rushed to hide their young. Warriors grabbed weapons, claws gleaming. The elders shouted orders, their voices trembling with fear. Tavani stood frozen, her heart pounding as she watched the first blast tear through the outer wall. The sound was deafening. Stone shattered, fire bloomed, and screams filled the air. The strong ones of her people charged forward, their crests burning with fury, their weapons ready. They roared with courage. But against the raiders' machines, even they began to fall. Elias found her in the chaos. His face was streaked with smoke, his hands already blackened from helping the wounded. Tavani, he shouted above the noise. Come with me. We need to get you to safety. But she shook her head, trembling. No, they will need help. Before she could say more, an explosion shook the ground. A beam of burning metal cut through the street. Elias cried out as the shockwave threw him backward. He hit the stone hard, his body pinned beneath a chunk of shattered wall. Tavani's chest went cold. She ran to him, claws scraping on the rubble. He was alive, barely. Blood trickled from his brow, his breath ragged. Go, he gasped, trying to push her away. Save yourself, but she could not. She would not. She dug her claws into the rubble, straining with every bit of strength in her small body. Her arms shook. Pain tore through her muscles. The stone refused to move. Around her, the battle raged. Warriors fell. Fire roared. Shadows of raiders moved closer. No, she whispered through clenched teeth. I will not lose him. With a cry that tore from the deepest part of her chest, she heaved with all her might. Her claws bled. Her shoulders burned. Slowly, the stone shifted but an inch, then more, until she dragged it free. Elias coughed, his eyes half open, but she did not stop. She hooked her arms under his and pulled, dragging him across the broken ground. Her legs shook. Her back screamed with pain. But step by step she carried him through smoke, through fire, through fear. Those who saw her were struck silent. The orphan, the weak one, the unwanted one, carrying a human with a strength none had believed she possessed. She did not notice their stares. All she saw was Elias, his face pale, his life slipping away. All she felt was the fire in her chest that pushed her forward. At last she reached the shelter where others had gathered. She lowered him gently onto the ground, her body collapsing beside him. Her arms were raw, her claws cracked, her chest heaving with exhaustion. But he was alive, and she had saved him. The night stretched on. The colony fought desperately, and in the end, the raiders retreated, leaving smoke and ruin behind. When the fires finally died, the people gathered to count their losses. Many were gone. Many more were wounded, but whispers filled the air, not only of grief but of something new. They whispered of Tavani, the weak one who had carried a human through fire, the orphan who had lifted stone with her bare claws, the female they had called unworthy, who had risked everything to protect one who chose her. When the elders walked through the wounded, their eyes fell on her. She sat beside Elias, her hand gently wrapped around his, her head bowed in exhaustion. They did not speak. Their pride kept their mouths closed, but their silence was different this time. It was not the silence of rejection. It was the silence of recognition. The other younglings, who had once mocked her, now looked at her with awe. They had seen her strength with their own eyes. They could not deny it. She had done what many of them could not. She had proven herself. Elias stirred, his voice weak but clear. Tavani? She leaned close, her eyes shining with relief. I am here. A faint smile touched his lips. You saved me. Tears filled her eyes as she whispered back, "You saved me first. You chose me when no one else would. How could I not save you?" His hand squeezed hers gently even through the pain. And in that moment, surrounded by smoke and silence, there was no doubt left in her heart. She was not nothing. She was not weak. She was not unworthy. She was Tavani. She was female. She was enough. The colony had seen. They could no longer deny her. She was no longer just the orphan, no longer just the outcast. She was the one who carried strength where none expected it. She was the one who had proven love stronger than shame. And though the elders said nothing, though the whisper still lingered, Tavani no longer cared. For the first time in her life, she no longer needed their approval. She had found her proof, not in their eyes, but in her own, and in the hand of the human who never let her believe she was nothing. The days after the attack passed slowly. The colony was wounded, scarred, but alive. Fires were put out, homes rebuilt, wounds bandaged. Yet even as the stone walls rose again, something else was changing. Something unseen but deeply felt. The people could not forget what they had witnessed. They had seen Tavani, the one they called weak, carrying a human through fire and ruin. They had seen her strength when their strongest had fallen. They had watched her refuse to abandon him, even as her body bled and broke. And now, when she walked through the streets, the whispers were no longer sharp with cruelty. They were softer, uncertain. Some held awe. Some even held respect, but Tavani no longer cared for whispers. For the first time in her life, she carried herself without bowing her head. Elias healed slowly. His body bore bruises and scars, but his spirit remained unbroken. Day by day, Tavani sat beside him, feeding him when his hands were too weak, singing soft tones of her people when the nights grew long. He would smile at her even in pain. "You saved me," he reminded her again and again, as though the memory gave him strength, and she would always answer the same. "You saved me first," because it was true. Long before she had pulled him from the fire, he had pulled her from the pit of loneliness. He had seen her when no one else would. He had chosen her when everyone else turned away. One evening, when the moons were rising silver over the desert, the colony gathered in the central hall. It was time for the elders to speak of the future. Who would lead the rebuilding? Who would be honored? Who would be remembered? Tavani stood at the edge, as she always had, her heart pounding. She did not expect her name to be spoken. She was still the orphan, still the one they had cast aside for so many years. But when the eldest voice rose, it was not to shame her. "We remember the day of fire," the elder said. "We remember who stood when others fell. We remember the orphan who proved she was more than we believed." The hall stirred with murmurs. Some nodded. Some still frowned, unwilling to change so quickly. But the words had been spoken. They could not be taken back. For the first time, Tavani was named not with pity, but with honor. After the gathering, she slipped outside, her chest heavy with emotions she could not name, relief, fear, hope, all tangled together. She found Elias waiting beneath the stars, leaning on a carved staff for support. His face was pale, but his smile was strong. "Well," he said softly, "sounds like they're starting to see you the way I always did." She lowered her gaze, claws twisting nervously. "Perhaps. But it does not matter anymore. I no longer need them to see me. It is enough that you do." His smile widened. He reached for her hand, warm and steady. "Then let me ask you something, Tavani. Not as a guest of this colony, not as an outsider, but as a man who has chosen you since the beginning." Her breath caught as his fingers curled around hers. His voice was quiet, yet it seemed to echo in her very heart. "Will you choose me too? Not because they approve, not because of pity, but because you want to." Her chest tightened. For so long she had believed herself unworthy of choice. For so long she had thought no one would ever ask her. And now here was Elias offering her not just his hand but his heart. She trembled, tears burning her eyes. Memories surged, the whispers, the rejection, the endless loneliness. And then the moments with him. The first smile, the first dance, the words that gave her courage, the fire she had carried him through. Slowly, she lifted her head. Her voice was soft, but it did not shake. "Yes, I choose you." The words seemed to change everything. The desert wind grew warmer, the stars brighter, the ache in her chest lighter. Elias drew her into his arms, careful of his wounds, and she rested her head against him. For the first time she felt no fear of being seen, no shame, only peace. And in that embrace, she realized something powerful. She was no longer just the orphan. She was no longer just the weak one. She was loved. She was chosen. She was whole. The colony might take time to accept. The elders might never admit their cruelty. The whispers might never fully fade, but none of that mattered anymore, because Tavani had made her choice. And so had Elias. Together, they would walk into whatever future waited, two souls who had found each other in the shadows of rejection and lit a fire that no storm could put out. That night, as she lay beside him beneath the endless desert sky, she whispered into the darkness, not for others to hear, but for herself, "I am female. I am enough. I am chosen."